Skyward encounter. Sunrise painted streaks of gold and amber across the sprawling runways of John F. Kennedy International Airport. Beneath this spectacular canvas, a crowd of passengers bustled about Terminal 4, each traveler wrapped within their private worlds of excitement, stress, or exhaustion. Through the immense windows of the boarding gate, an elegant Boeing 787 gleamed proudly under the morning sun. Flight 825 from New York to San Francisco awaited its passengers, engines murmuring gently, an eager giant poised for its journey across America. Among the first-class passengers boarding early that morning was Amelia Harper. Tall, graceful, with a dignified bearing, Amelia exuded quiet authority. Her ebony hair was arranged neatly, complementing a classic navy blue suit that spoke volumes about her professionalism. But what stood out most was the warmth and compassion in her brown eyes, evident every time she offered a polite smile to the strangers around her. Yet despite Amelia's calm exterior, her mind was in turmoil. As a senior Federal Aviation Administration (FAA) inspector and a newly appointed regional director, she was en route to San Francisco to oversee crucial safety audits. It was her responsibility to ensure the highest aviation standards, and each journey was an opportunity to observe firsthand the dynamics on board an aircraft. Amelia carried her duties seriously. Thousands of passengers depended on her vigilance and professionalism. Still, she hoped for a restful flight before what promised to be a demanding week. Settling comfortably into her luxurious first-class seat, Amelia breathed deeply, savoring the peacefulness as passengers filtered slowly aboard. To her left, a middle-aged couple softly debated sightseeing plans, while behind her, a young entrepreneur whispered fervently on a call about funding rounds and market potentials. Amelia, smiling to herself, appreciated these small human dramas she encountered frequently in her travels, each unique yet all somehow connected by the journey they shared. The cabin crew soon emerged from behind the partition, moving gracefully down the aisle, offering pre-flight drinks and amenities. Leading the team was a senior flight attendant whose badge read Patricia Matthews. She moved with practiced efficiency, her uniform impeccable, blonde hair drawn back neatly. But Amelia immediately noted something subtly troubling: a stiffness in Patricia's demeanor, a tension beneath her carefully constructed facade. Amelia wondered briefly if the crew member was merely tired or perhaps preoccupied by personal matters. She reminded herself gently that everyone carried hidden burdens. Compassion was always the best lens through which to view others. However, Amelia's contemplative mood shifted as Patricia began her service. She approached each passenger warmly, presenting menus, blankets, and beverages with professional courtesy. Yet, as Patricia neared Amelia's row, she hesitated briefly, an unreadable expression crossing her face, before she inexplicably bypassed Amelia altogether. The action was discreet yet deliberate. Amelia raised an eyebrow, puzzled. Had Patricia simply forgotten, distracted by her tasks? It was possible. But instinct, sharpened by years of observing cabin dynamics, hinted that something deeper was at play. Choosing patience, Amelia decided not to rush judgment. She returned to perusing an aviation safety report she brought along, eager to immerse herself once again in the data points that defined her life's mission. Yet, her mind couldn't entirely shake off Patricia's odd omission. From the corner of her eye, she noticed other attendants serving passengers, each providing the customary amenities. But strangely, none approached Amelia's seat. Eventually, Amelia politely raised a hand to draw attention. Her gesture was acknowledged briefly by a younger flight attendant, whose name badge read Sophia. But the young woman's nervous glance toward Patricia spoke volumes. Sophia hesitated, clearly uncertain how to respond, then quickly disappeared into the galley. Amelia felt a knot tighten gently within her stomach, the first sign that this was more than mere oversight. Throughout her career, she'd encountered occasional bias, subtle prejudices cloaked behind professional facades. Each incident stung deeply, a reminder of the shadows humanity still struggled to dispel. But she hoped, perhaps naively, that aviation, A field predicated on professionalism and meticulous standards would have evolved beyond such pettiness. Just as boarding completed and passengers settled, Patricia returned directly to Amelia's seat. But rather than offering the amenities that had been skipped, Patricia's demeanor had grown colder. Her blue eyes fixed pointedly on Amelia's face, a forced courtesy thinly masking suspicion. "Miss Harper," Patricia began stiffly, "may I see your boarding pass again, please?" The request caught Amelia off guard, though she kept her composure effortlessly. Her experience had taught her to handle confrontations with dignity, always assuming the best intentions, even when suspecting otherwise. "Certainly," Amelia replied calmly, retrieving her boarding pass from her purse and handing it smoothly to Patricia. Patricia examined it for an unusually long moment, her brow furrowing theatrically. Amelia noticed passengers around her beginning to glance subtly toward the encounter, curiosity piqued by Patricia's obvious scrutiny. "Is everything all right?" Amelia asked, voice steady but warm, inviting a resolution. Patricia handed back the boarding pass, her lips thin and unsmiling. "There seems to be a confusion regarding your seat assignment, Miss Harper. The system indicates your seat should be in economy class. I'm afraid you'll need to vacate this seat immediately." Nearby passengers stiffened, tension rippling outward as people recognized a confrontation brewing. Amelia's heartbeat quickened slightly, though outwardly she remained unruffled. She knew perfectly well her seat was assigned correctly, having double-checked her reservation meticulously, a practice ingrained by years of professional travel. But beyond this, she recognized an injustice beginning to unfold, one demanding clarity and firm correction. "Perhaps you could check the passenger manifest again," Amelia suggested gently. "There might be a mistake on your side." Patricia shook her head curtly, eyes hardening. "I've checked twice already. You're not authorized to sit in first class. Please gather your belongings and follow me to your correct seat." Around them, whispers began to surface. The middle-aged couple glanced sympathetically toward Amelia, uncertain how to respond. Behind her, the entrepreneur murmured something quietly into his phone, gaze keenly attentive. Amelia drew a deep, steadying breath, gathering patience. She hated confrontations but detested injustice more. Calmly, firmly, she spoke once more. "I assure you, Miss Matthews, my seat assignment is accurate. Perhaps we should involve the gate agent for clarification." Patricia visibly bristled, her authority challenged. "Miss Harper," she insisted sharply, voice carrying enough to draw attention from farther rows, "this airline has strict policies regarding passengers attempting to self-upgrade. I must ask you again to move immediately." Passengers openly stared now, sensing drama. Amelia felt a heavy pang of disappointment, not merely at Patricia's behavior, but at the prejudiced assumptions that clearly fueled it. Yet Amelia resisted playing her trump card just yet. She carried authority that Patricia couldn't even fathom. But wielding power was never her first response. Empathy was. Carefully choosing diplomacy, Amelia repeated softly, her voice dignified and unwavering, "I kindly request you reconfirm with ground control. This is my assigned seat, and I will remain here until this is resolved properly." Patricia's jaw tightened visibly. She spun on her heel, marching toward the galley with quick, angry steps. Whispers grew louder. Amelia heard snippets of conversation, passengers exchanging shocked glances, speculations being muttered. Amelia leaned back, heart aching slightly beneath her composed exterior. She had hoped this flight would be peaceful, free of conflict. Yet now, confrontation seemed inevitable. She thought briefly about simply presenting her FAA credentials right away, but hesitated. She knew revealing her true authority would silence Patricia instantly, perhaps even humiliatingly. But her deeper goal was always education, transformation, addressing bias so it would not be repeated again. As the cabin doors sealed and engines powered toward departure, Amelia braced herself gently. Though hurt by Patricia's unjust suspicion, Amelia also saw an opportunity. Perhaps this confrontation was exactly what Patricia and the airline needed a sharp wake-up call about hidden prejudices within their own ranks, a chance to grow, evolve, and truly embody aviation's promise of equality. Outside the window, sunlight warmed the wings, gently lifting Flight 825 from the runway into a bright blue sky. Amelia Harper, FAA Regional Director, advocate of equality and passenger, settled back calmly in her seat, readying herself for the confrontation yet to come. High above the earth, two women prepared for a battle not of fists, but of dignity, respect, and the powerful truths they carried. The stage was set. The lesson awaited. The world beneath them, oblivious, continued to spin, unaware that at 35,000 feet, prejudice and hidden power were preparing to collide. The clouds beneath her feet, at 35,000 feet, above the wispy veil of clouds blanketing America's heartland, Flight 825 had settled into the rhythm of cruising altitude. The plane sailed smoothly through crystalline skies that stretched endlessly, unmarked and seemingly untouched by the conflicts occurring within its own cabin. Amelia Harper adjusted the window shade slightly, allowing a thin sliver of sunlight to illuminate her neatly manicured hands. A quiet tension lingered in her chest, a feeling of unresolved injustice that wouldn't fade easily, no matter how calmly she had handled herself moments ago. She sighed softly, trying to dismiss the uneasy sensation of being scrutinized. Despite her stoicism, Amelia felt the burn of humiliation. As Regional Director of the Federal Aviation Administration, her entire career revolved around protecting and enhancing passengers' rights. Yet here she was, confronting an overtly discriminatory situation aboard an aircraft, the very place she spent her life making safer and more equitable for everyone. Amelia caught glimpses of passengers sneaking quick glances in her direction, some with sympathy, others with muted curiosity, as if waiting for the drama to escalate again. Margaret, the silver-haired woman seated across the aisle, leaned in with maternal concern etched deeply into her features. "You handled that with remarkable composure, dear," Margaret murmured gently, her husband nodding quietly at her side. "But no one should have to endure something like that, especially not someone who clearly belongs here." Amelia offered a faint, grateful smile. "Thank you, Margaret. Sometimes composure is all we have in situations like this. Losing my temper would have only reinforced unfair stereotypes." Margaret nodded knowingly, sharing an understanding glance with her husband. "I know how it feels, dear. My husband, Robert, and I grew up seeing these kinds of ugly behaviors. It's heartbreaking that such attitudes still exist." Robert leaned forward slightly, adjusting the rim of his glasses. His voice was calm but firm. "We're prepared to offer our statements if the airline investigates. This isn't something they can brush under the rug." Amelia felt a pang of gratitude swell within her chest. Despite the incident's ugliness, she was relieved to find allies, strangers who recognized injustice without prompting. It affirmed a powerful truth, that empathy could bloom even in moments of conflict. Before Amelia could respond, Rosa, the young flight attendant who had seemed so uncomfortable during Patricia's earlier confrontation, appeared quietly beside her. Rosa held a small porcelain cup filled with steaming herbal tea. "Miss Harper," Rosa said softly, her eyes full of genuine compassion, "I noticed you hadn't received your beverage earlier. Please accept this. It's chamomile, very calming. On behalf of the crew, I'm so sorry for the misunderstanding. It should never have happened." Amelia reached out, accepting the gesture graciously. She could sense Rosa's sincerity clearly, beneath layers of discomfort. She wasn't part of Patricia's hostility. Rather, Rosa was caught in the unfortunate wake of her senior colleague's behavior. "Thank you, Rosa. Your kindness means a great deal right now," Amelia replied gently, her voice a soothing contrast to the earlier tension. Rosa lingered for a second longer, hesitating, clearly wanting to speak further but unsure of how much she could safely say. After a moment, she took a breath and lowered her voice. "Miss Harper, Patricia isn't usually like this. Something's been off with her lately. But but that doesn't justify her actions. I just wanted you to know." Amelia studied Rose's face carefully, recognizing the genuine distress there. It was a reminder that behind every discriminatory action, there was often a complicated web of human frailty and struggle. While that didn't justify Patricia's behavior, understanding its context could guide a more effective response. Amelia nodded, softening slightly. "I understand, Rosa. Everyone carries their own burdens. But still, accountability matters. Not just for me, but for every passenger who trusts this airline." Rosa dipped her head respectfully, clearly absorbing Amelia's subtle lesson. "Yes, ma'am. I agree wholeheartedly." As Rosa departed quietly, Amelia sipped her tea thoughtfully, appreciating the warmth sliding down her throat. She glanced toward the front of the plane, where Patricia could occasionally be seen consulting with another attendant behind the curtains separating the galley from the passenger cabin. Patricia's stiff posture betrayed lingering tension, as if she was aware of Amelia's eyes on her even from that distance. Amelia felt no joy in Patricia's discomfort, yet the unresolved issue gnawed at her. There was something particularly distressing about discrimination within aviation, an industry founded on the ideals of interconnectedness and safety. For Amelia, flying represented humanity's greatest aspirations, transcending boundaries, uniting cultures, and proving human capacity for excellence. Yet today, that ideal felt tarnished. Her mind drifted to the myriad aviation conferences she'd attended, the endless workshops on safety protocols, and cultural competency sessions designed to improve customer experience. Patricia's actions flew directly against everything Amelia championed professionally. It felt personal, not just because Amelia was the target, but because aviation itself, her lifelong passion, was being betrayed at that moment. Amelia reached into her handbag, pulling out her notebook, preparing to document the incident meticulously. She had always taught her teams that detailed records protected truth. Her elegant handwriting flowed smoothly, capturing details of her boarding, the repeated confrontations, and the names of nearby witnesses, Margaret, Robert, even Rose's attempts at kindness. As she wrote, the businessman who had been seated quietly behind her approached cautiously, holding his tablet. Amelia remembered him as the tech entrepreneur who had observed the confrontation and appeared genuinely disturbed by it. He wore a simple, casual sweater, his brown hair tousled from hours of focused work. "Excuse me," he began politely. "Miss Harper, I'm David Morgan. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I wanted you to know. I witnessed everything and have detailed notes in case you need additional documentation." Amelia paused her writing, offering him a grateful smile. "That's very thoughtful of you, Mr. Just call me Alex," he said with a sheepish smile. "Alex Donovan. I run a startup in Silicon Valley. Usually, flights are my only quiet time, but today's been anything but peaceful." He hesitated briefly, then added sincerely, "If this escalates legally or publicly, you have my full support." "Thank you, Alex," Amelia said gently, touched by yet another unexpected gesture of solidarity. "I appreciate your willingness to step up." Alex nodded, clearly relieved she was receptive. "I don't know what Patricia's issue is, but I fly constantly, and I've never seen anyone get treated the way you were today. You deserve better." Amelia smiled softly, grateful for the sincerity. "We all deserve better. That's why it's so important to speak up." Alex glanced down the aisle, noticing Patricia reappear briefly, a tense look on her face. He lowered his voice, almost conspiratorially. "Honestly, someone should record this. The airline should be embarrassed. People need to know what's happening up here." Amelia hesitated. She understood Alex's outrage, but knew that public outrage was a double-edged sword. It could force accountability, but also fan the flames of hostility. Amelia didn't crave public revenge. She wanted systemic change. "I appreciate your support," Amelia replied carefully, "but I'm hoping this can be resolved constructively, without causing unnecessary damage." Alex nodded respectfully. "Of course. I get it. But if you ever need someone to back your story, I'm here." As Alex returned to his seat, Amelia glanced again toward Patricia, who had now briefly stepped into the cabin to make a routine announcement about mild turbulence ahead. Though Patricia kept her voice professional and calm, her eyes never met Amelia's, as if acknowledging her would admit defeat. Yet Amelia sensed Patricia's discomfort. It was visible in the subtle twitch of her jaw, the stiffness in her gestures. Amelia closed her notebook gently, leaning back and staring out at the sea of clouds beneath the aircraft. Each fluffy cloud appeared tranquil and gentle from this height, yet Amelia knew the truth. Turbulence lay hidden beneath their deceptively peaceful surfaces. Her mind wandered, considering the irony of the moment. A person responsible for upholding aviation safety and fairness, now confronted by the very prejudice she had spent years trying to eradicate. Yet she also knew every injustice was an opportunity in disguise, an opportunity to educate, to challenge, and to inspire change. No journey toward progress was without turbulence, and sometimes confrontation was precisely what forced necessary conversations into the open. Amelia exhaled softly, determination solidifying within her chest. Patricia's ignorance had forced a spotlight onto hidden biases that still existed even in the skies. Amelia intended to use that spotlight productively. This moment, no matter how uncomfortable, could become a powerful catalyst for positive change. She glanced around the cabin once more, sensing the support of those around her, allies forged from shared humanity rather than familiarity. Margaret gave a reassuring nod. Robert offered an encouraging smile. Rosa passed by once more, eyes filled with quiet solidarity. Even Alex, now back in his seat, was typing rapidly, no doubt sharing the lessons he'd witnessed firsthand. In that moment, Amelia knew the incident was bigger than her, bigger even than Patricia's personal biases. It was about making the skies, and the world below, better for everyone who journeyed within them. She straightened her posture, lifted her chin confidently, and returned her gaze out the window. The clouds beneath her feet seemed to stretch infinitely forward, just like the work ahead. And she was ready. The weight of authority. The plane continued its steady journey westward, slicing gracefully through the thin upper atmosphere at a cruising altitude of 35,000 feet. Below, fields, mountains, and rivers formed a breathtaking patchwork, serene and untouched by the tensions simmering quietly inside the first-class cabin. Amelia Harper sat calmly, outwardly composed, yet her heart pulsed slightly faster than usual. She was no stranger to difficult situations. Her career had always placed her in roles that demanded a cool head and fair judgment. Yet even she felt rattled by Patricia Matthews' persistent hostility. Outside the window, vast expanses of sky stretched into infinite shades of blue. It should have been calming, even liberating, but Amelia found it difficult to shake off the sting of Patricia's accusations. Her mind replayed the flight attendant's stern words. "You're not authorized to sit here," words delivered with absolute conviction, and reinforced by an assumption that ran deeper than simple misunderstanding. Amelia's reflection was interrupted when Margaret leaned forward, whispering again from across the aisle, a gentle firmness still evident in her voice. "You know, dear," Margaret began softly, "it's brave of you not to escalate things yet, but there's a time when enough is enough. Don't feel guilty if you have to stand your ground even harder." Amelia smiled slightly, sensing Margaret's motherly protectiveness. "I appreciate that. Honestly, I don't want confrontation, but neither can I overlook what happened. This incident could reflect something deeper within the airline's culture." Margaret nodded thoughtfully, glancing toward Patricia, who was standing at the front galley now, still visibly tense. "You're right. And that woman over there needs to realize this isn't acceptable. Maybe seeing someone like you challenge her is exactly what she needs." The subtle encouragement strengthened Amelia's resolve. As an FAA regional director, she had seen firsthand the ripple effects of neglecting smaller incidents of discrimination or unfair treatment. Allowing injustice, even a single incident, to slide meant implicitly endorsing it. Amelia's personal discomfort paled against the broader responsibility she felt toward all passengers who didn't have the privilege of her authority or knowledge. Just then, Patricia emerged again from the galley, walking down the aisle. This time, her expression was more composed, though her jaw remained tight, her gaze refusing to meet Amelia's. She busied herself with mundane tasks, adjusting overhead bins, ensuring passengers' comfort, but pointedly avoiding Amelia's row. Yet even this silence felt aggressive, filled with a cold hostility. Amelia glanced at her watch. There were still nearly 3 hours left before landing in San Francisco. 3 hours to either sit silently in discomfort or address the problem directly. She knew the stakes involved. As FAA leadership, the decisions she made now wouldn't just influence Patricia's career. They could reverberate throughout the airline industry. She took a deep breath and pressed the call button above her seat. A soft ding sounded, prompting Patricia to pause momentarily, her face tensing visibly at the signal. However, instead of approaching herself, she whispered instructions to Rosa, the younger attendant. Amelia noted the delegation immediately. Patricia clearly preferred avoiding another direct confrontation. Rosa approached Amelia cautiously, concern shadowing her youthful face. "Yes, Miss Harper, can I assist you?" Amelia kept her voice gentle, understanding Rosa's delicate position. "Please ask Miss Matthews to join us. I'd like to speak to her directly about earlier." Rosa nodded, visibly uncomfortable but compliant. "Certainly, Miss Harper. I'll relay the message." Moments later, Patricia emerged from behind the galley curtain. Her expression was taut, controlled, yet beneath the veneer of composure lurked resentment. Passengers nearby grew still, conversations abruptly quieted, sensing another confrontation about to unfold. Patricia stepped up, folding her hands formally. Her tone was rigid, her eyes barely concealing her irritation. "Miss Harper, is there something else I can do for you?" "Yes," Amelia responded evenly, voice calm yet assertive. "I'd like you to explain clearly why you insisted my seat wasn't authorized, especially after I provided valid documentation." Twice. Patricia pursed her lips, visibly uncomfortable with being questioned publicly. "As I explained earlier, we had discrepancies in our manifest. It wasn't personal." Amelia, sensing evasiveness, pressed calmly but firmly. "Yet your manner indicated otherwise. Tell me honestly, was this about seat assignments or something deeper? Because if this is standard procedure, your airline needs significant retraining." The cabin fell into a tense hush, passengers around them discreetly leaning in, phones subtly angled to record the exchange. Rosa glanced anxiously from Amelia to Patricia, clearly uncomfortable yet unwilling to intercede. Patricia's eyes flashed briefly with defensiveness before she composed herself. "It was purely procedural. I'm required to confirm passengers' seats. Perhaps you misunderstood." Margaret's husband, Robert, shook his head, speaking up gently yet authoritatively. "We all saw it, Miss Matthews. There was nothing routine about your behavior. You targeted Miss Harper unfairly, repeatedly." Murmurs rippled quietly through the cabin. Amelia felt grateful for Robert's blunt honesty, but knew she needed to handle this herself to ensure clarity. "Miss Matthews," Amelia continued, her voice unwavering, "I travel frequently, professionally, and personally. I've seen genuine seat errors. Your treatment, however, clearly singled me out. I'm giving you a chance right now to reconsider your actions and admit any mistakes." Patricia's eyes narrowed slightly, defiance flaring briefly before subsiding into guarded neutrality. "If you prefer, I can have the captain verify your ticket once more." Amelia's patience reached its limits. With deliberate slowness, she opened her carry-on bag, withdrawing a small leather folder containing her FAA credentials. She paused momentarily, feeling the eyes of dozens of passengers upon her, aware that the moment she had hoped to avoid had arrived. "You know," Amelia began calmly, her voice resonating with an authority she rarely needed to invoke, "I hoped we could resolve this without escalating, but it seems necessary." Patricia watched, suddenly wary, as Amelia carefully flipped open the folder. The bold gold emblem of the Federal Aviation Administration gleamed prominently. Beneath it, her name and title, Regional Director Amelia Harper, stood out clearly. Several passengers gasped audibly, a collective ripple of astonishment moving through the cabin. Patricia's face paled rapidly, her eyes widening, jaw slackening in disbelief. It was a reaction Amelia had anticipated yet regretted nonetheless. Patricia's voice faltered noticeably. "Miss Harper, I didn't realize." "You didn't bother to realize," Amelia interrupted calmly yet sternly. "You assumed wrongly about me, based entirely on your perceptions. Had you thoroughly checked your records, none of this would have occurred." Patricia visibly trembled, stepping back involuntarily as the weight of her actions sank in. Amelia knew this reaction well. She had witnessed it often enough in moments when hidden biases collided with the unexpected reality of authority. With a voice quiet yet commanding, Amelia continued, ensuring the message was clear. "My job at the FAA involves enforcing safety, fairness, and dignity aboard every flight. Your behavior today contradicts every principle of passenger rights that we work tirelessly to uphold. I intend to report this, not from anger or revenge, but to ensure accountability and systemic change." Patricia, her composure now shattered, stammered quietly, "Miss Harper, I apologize. Truly, it was a mistake." Amelia's response was firm, yet compassionately measured. "Mistakes happen. Biases exist, but real apologies require reflection, change, and action. I accept your apology, but my duty demands accountability." Patricia nodded slowly, deeply shaken. She withdrew toward the galley, quiet and clearly introspective. The cabin, sensing the climax had passed, gradually relaxed again. Amelia saw Rosa lingering near the galley entrance, visibly relieved yet saddened by the unfolding events. As Amelia carefully placed her badge back into her bag, Margaret leaned across again, her voice soft but clear. "You did the right thing. It wasn't easy, but it was right." Amelia sighed gently, meeting Margaret's compassionate gaze. "Thank you. But this isn't the end. It's just the beginning. Now, the real work starts." She glanced once more through the airplane window, gazing down at the endless skies stretching beneath them, knowing the confrontation above these clouds had already set the wheels of change in motion. She understood fully the weight of the authority she carried, not merely as an FAA director, but as someone who'd just been forced to confront discrimination publicly. And yet Amelia knew this experience had forged something powerful. It had set a precedent, laid the groundwork for important conversations that aviation, and society itself, still desperately needed. Above the distant earth, Amelia Harper quietly steeled herself for the long journey ahead, not just the flight's remaining hours, but the greater, harder path toward a fairer sky for everyone. The aftermath of turbulence. The aircraft gently rocked, passing through pockets of invisible turbulence high above the plains below. Amelia Harper's gaze drifted once more out the window, watching clouds ripple like a vast white ocean beneath the aircraft's wings. Inside her chest, a quiet storm churned, calmer now, perhaps, yet still charged with electricity from the confrontation that had just unfolded. Around her, first-class passengers whispered discreetly. Some had turned fully back toward their screens and magazines, choosing polite disengagement. Others stole occasional curious glances at Amelia, as though trying to reconcile her composed demeanor with the dramatic scene they'd witnessed. Yet Amelia sat dignified and upright, refusing to show any lingering unease. The badge she had revealed was now safely hidden again, a silent symbol of authority that had silenced Patricia's discriminatory demands. But at what cost? Amelia had never wanted to embarrass Patricia, though part of her felt justified in finally putting a halt to the escalating injustice. Even so, she was keenly aware that exercising her authority came with heavy consequences, not only for Patricia but potentially for Amelia herself. She knew the scrutiny this incident could attract if it became widely known. The thought was exhausting, But she also knew that systemic change rarely happened quietly, without public awareness. A movement near the galley caught Amelia's attention. Patricia stood quietly talking to Sophia, the younger attendant. Amelia saw it in their hushed exchange, the tension of mentorship strained. An experienced crew member whose actions had inadvertently taught her protege exactly what not to do. The sadness of that realization lingered in Amelia's mind. She wasn't naive. Discrimination often sprang from ignorance or fear rather than outright malice. But ignorance had no place at this altitude, where lives depended on precision, fairness, and integrity. Sophia soon approached Amelia, stepping forward timidly, her expression uncertain, eyes shimmering with concern. "Miss Harper, I wanted to personally apologize again. The whole crew is deeply upset by what happened." Amelia softened her tone immediately, sensing the younger woman's sincerity. "I appreciate your concern, Sophia. You handled yourself well." Sophia paused, looking conflicted. Then she said quietly, almost apologetically, "Patricia trained me personally. She's usually strict but fair. I never thought. She never acted like this before. Not openly." Amelia nodded thoughtfully. "Sometimes stress reveals biases we didn't realize we carried. It doesn't excuse it, but understanding can lead to growth." Sophia glanced toward the front cabin, worry shadowing her youthful features. "Do you think she'll lose her job?" Amelia considered carefully, weighing the seriousness of Patricia's actions against the human cost of punitive responses. "I can't say for certain. I'll ensure accountability, but I also believe in restorative justice. Perhaps Patricia can learn from this, if she's open to it." Relief washed across Sophia's face. "I hope so. I've learned a lot today myself, about standing up for passengers, not just rules." Amelia felt warmth loom gently in her chest at Sophia's sincerity. "Good. Aviation depends not just on rules but on compassion, fairness, and respect. Remember that, and you'll become an exceptional flight attendant." Sophia smiled gratefully, returning quietly to the galley, clearly processing their exchange. Amelia sensed she'd just influenced a young professional's career positively. Yet she couldn't ignore the broader implications still hanging heavy around Patricia's actions. Lost briefly in thought, Amelia barely noticed Alex Donovan, returning from the lavatory, until he paused again by her seat, hesitant but clearly wanting to speak. Amelia smiled warmly, inviting him to sit beside her briefly, in an empty adjacent seat. "Something else on your mind, Alex?" she asked gently. Alex sighed, his normally confident expression edged with an uncharacteristic hesitation. "I've been thinking. What happened today made me reconsider some things. It's easy to say you support fairness and equality, but seeing this firsthand, I guess it hit differently." Amelia studied him with interest. "In what way?" Alex rubbed his hands nervously. "I own a tech company. Small, growing fast. I've talked a lot about diversity, but maybe I've been complacent. Watching you confront Patricia openly forced me to think deeply. How many times have I seen discrimination and done nothing because I wasn't directly involved?" Amelia nodded slowly, appreciating his honesty. "Awareness is powerful. Use your platform, your company, your influence to foster real inclusion. Today's incident could become a catalyst for meaningful change, if we all choose to make it one." Alex brightened slightly, as though inspired by her words. "I'll commit to that. And if the airline tries to downplay this, just know you've got support. My social media posts are already generating conversation. People are angry, and I think this airline needs a wake-up call." Amelia smiled appreciatively, yet cautiously. "Just remember, accountability matters more than outrage. It's easy for the public to become angry briefly, then move on. But lasting change comes from thoughtful dialogue and sustained effort." Alex nodded respectfully, visibly absorbing her advice. "You've taught me something powerful today, Miss Harper. Not just about aviation, but about leadership. Thank you." As Alex returned thoughtfully to his seat, Amelia felt a surge of optimism. Perhaps today's ugly event, though deeply uncomfortable, had already begun planting seeds of change beyond her immediate circle. Yet her contemplation was interrupted abruptly as Patricia approached, this time walking straight to Amelia's seat, her expression now softened into genuine humility. The earlier arrogance had vanished, replaced with visible regret. Patricia spoke quietly, her voice subdued. "Miss Harper, I know I already apologized, but please, allow me to say it clearly. My behavior today was unacceptable. I made assumptions that were not just incorrect but harmful. I take full responsibility." Amelia studied Patricia carefully, seeing sincere remorse in her eyes now. Eyes that earlier had held only suspicion and prejudice. "I accept your apology, Patricia, but accountability requires action, not just words. How will you ensure this never happens again? Not to me or anyone else." Patricia sighed deeply, clearly wrestling internally. "I realize I have biases I wasn't fully aware of. This has been a wake-up call. If the airline offers retraining, I'll embrace it completely. And beyond that, personally, I promise you, I'll reflect and make changes." Amelia nodded gently, satisfied Patricia had finally understood the gravity of her error. Then today isn't just a painful incident, it becomes a turning point. Remember this moment. Share it openly with your colleagues. Sometimes the best learning comes from our worst moments. Patricia visibly relaxed slightly, gratitude evident. "Thank you for handling this the way you did. I didn't deserve your patience. Everyone deserves an opportunity to grow." Amelia replied firmly, yet compassionately. "What you choose to do with this experience, that determines your path forward." Patricia nodded solemnly, turning away thoughtfully. Amelia watched her retreat, feeling a quiet yet profound sense of closure begin settling within her. Patricia's genuine acknowledgement had been necessary, both personally and professionally. Now, Amelia would ensure the airline followed through, supporting its staff in real, meaningful ways. Outside the window, the landscape below gradually transitioned from flat prairies into rocky mountain ranges stretching upward, reaching toward the aircraft. Amelia thought quietly that today mirrored that same journey, from low valleys of ignorance toward higher ground of understanding and respect. She settled back, feeling exhaustion and relief intertwined. Though the confrontation had drained her, it also ignited something powerful. Today was not merely about correcting one flight attendant's behavior. It was about reaffirming aviation's highest ideals, principles Amelia herself had dedicated a lifetime to upholding. As Flight 825 began its gradual descent toward San Francisco, Amelia Harper felt both the weight and power of authority, not simply the badge she carried, but the deeper responsibility that came with it. And in that moment, high above the clouds, she quietly resolved once more. Her fight for fairness and equality was only just beginning. Landing with purpose. As Flight 825 descended gracefully through scattered clouds, sunlight filtered through the aircraft windows, painting delicate patterns across Amelia Harper's thoughtful face. She felt a mixture of relief, exhaustion, and a deep sense of determination. The final stage of her journey wasn't merely touching down in San Francisco. It was the meaningful change this incident could ignite. Amelia tucked her notes carefully into her briefcase, her FAA credentials resting atop a meticulous stack of documents. She had spent the last half-hour outlining a formal report, calm, factual, and clear, one that would shake the airline's response not just to Patricia's behavior, but to systemic issues potentially lingering beneath the surface. A gentle touch on her shoulder interrupted her thoughts. Margaret, her soft gray eyes warm with empathy, leaned toward Amelia one last time. "We're about to land, my dear," Margaret said gently, a motherly tone coloring her voice. "Are you feeling all right now?" Amelia nodded sincerely, meeting Margaret's gaze with a genuine smile. "I'm grateful for your support. This wasn't easy, but knowing I wasn't alone made all the difference." Robert leaned in too, offering quiet strength through his words. "We'll gladly testify, if necessary." People need to understand this kind of treatment can't be tolerated anymore. Amelia touched his arm gently, grateful beyond words. Thank you, Robert. Your willingness to speak up is exactly what the aviation community and the world needs right now. Outside, the city of San Francisco appeared beneath them, sprawling elegantly across hills, its familiar landmarks shimmering in afternoon light. Amelia had traveled here countless times, always focused on aviation safety audits and industry conferences. Today, though, the city looked different, full of potential for meaningful dialogue and reform. As the aircraft gently touched down, passengers stirred to life, collecting belongings, preparing to depart. Amelia remained seated, composed yet resolute, knowing her most critical moments still lay ahead. Patricia stood near the exit door, preparing it for arrival procedures, her movements more subdued than before. Occasionally, she glanced discreetly toward Amelia, remorse visible in her eyes. Sophia made a final thoughtful approach, kneeling slightly by Amelia's seat. Miss Harper, I just wanted to thank you again. You've shown me what real leadership looks like. I'll never forget this. Amelia smiled softly, moved deeply by the young woman's sincerity. Keep leading with empathy and integrity. Sophia, aviation desperately needs people like you. Sophia's eyes glistened briefly as she nodded and moved back to her position near Patricia, clearly thoughtful, reflecting on the events that would likely shape her career forever. As passengers began leaving, Amelia took a deep, steadying breath, her mind now shifting fully into professional mode. She gathered her belongings methodically, then calmly stepped toward the aircraft's exit. Patricia met her gaze squarely for the first time since their confrontation, her eyes speaking volumes beyond her softly uttered words. Miss Harper, again, I apologize for everything today. I truly hope something positive comes from this. I won't forget your kindness despite everything. Amelia nodded solemnly. I believe it will, Patricia. But now it depends on you and your airline to take concrete steps forward. Accountability and growth. Remember that. Patricia inclined her head respectfully, clearly understanding the significance of Amelia's words. It was a moment of quiet redemption, a difficult lesson internalized in the presence of authority wielded responsibly. Upon stepping through the jetway onto solid ground, Amelia felt an immense burden begin to lift. Her phone immediately buzzed. Multiple missed calls and messages awaited her, no doubt sparked by the social media storm Alex Donovan had begun. Amelia was momentarily overwhelmed, pausing to gather strength for the battles ahead. Yet before she could fully collect her thoughts, a woman dressed in an impeccable business suit approached briskly, her identification tag marking her as Susan Keller, Director of Customer Relations. Miss Harper, Susan began respectfully, extending her hand. We received preliminary word from the captain about the incident on board. We deeply regret what happened. Could you spare a few moments to speak privately? Amelia nodded, following Susan to a private office near the gate. The small room was calm, soundproofed from the airport's usual chaos. Susan quickly closed the door, her face earnest with concern. Miss Harper, first, let me clearly express our deepest apologies. Patricia Matthews' behavior was entirely unacceptable. We've already initiated an internal review and placed her on administrative leave pending further investigation. Amelia raised a hand slightly, signaling measured caution. I appreciate your swift response. However, while Patricia must be held accountable, she isn't the only issue. This incident indicates deeper biases that may exist within your airline. The solution must address the system, not merely one individual. Susan nodded gravely. We fully agree. Our CEO has already called an emergency board meeting to discuss new mandatory inclusivity and bias training programs. We genuinely want to do better. Amelia reached into her briefcase, producing the neatly written formal report. Then let's start here. I've detailed the entire event, witnesses, suggestions for training improvements, and outlined accountability measures. I strongly recommend your airline undertake comprehensive retraining, not just for flight attendants, but all customer-facing staff. Susan accepted the document solemnly, impressed by Amelia's thoroughness. "We'll review this carefully, but would you consider directly consulting with us on implementing these reforms? Your experience would be invaluable." Amelia hesitated momentarily. Accepting meant additional pressure and scrutiny, but she also recognized the opportunity for lasting impact. She exhaled, a gentle but determined smile touching her lips. "I'll gladly consult. My position at the FAA isn't just about regulation. It's about shaping aviation culture positively." Susan visibly relaxed, gratitude clear on her face. "Thank you. We genuinely need your guidance. Today's incident opened our eyes to how much work remains to be done." After their meeting concluded, Amelia walked slowly through San Francisco International Airport's bustling corridors, deeply reflective. The incident on Flight 825 had started as a humiliating, painful encounter, yet had rapidly become an opportunity to challenge prejudice, reshape aviation culture, and inspire individual growth. At baggage claim, Amelia was greeted by Alex Donovan, Margaret, and Robert, who'd gathered together, chatting quietly. Alex immediately approached her, his eyes bright with determination. "The posts online are exploding. Passengers are demanding accountability. You've sparked something big." Margaret touched Amelia's arm kindly. "We're proud to support you in whatever comes next, dear." Amelia felt tears of gratitude sting the corners of her eyes briefly. What matters most is that something good emerges, real change, lasting improvement. "I couldn't do it without your courage and support." As they exchanged goodbyes, Amelia stepped into the cool, fresh California air outside the terminal. Golden afternoon sunlight touched her face, offering warmth and renewal. She knew today marked the beginning, not the end, of her journey. Days later, news articles and television reports highlighted Flight 825's confrontation, triggering nationwide conversations about discrimination in aviation. Amelia's quiet leadership style resonated, setting a clear example that accountability wasn't synonymous with vengeance, but rather growth. Months after, Amelia stood at a national aviation industry conference, delivering a keynote speech about empathy, accountability, and change. Patricia Matthews sat in the audience, no longer wearing hostility or defensiveness, but attentive, thoughtful, determined to redeem herself. Amelia's voice carried softly, but confidently across the room. "Our greatest achievements happen when we confront uncomfortable truths openly. I experienced firsthand how painful that process can be, but pain can lead to growth, and growth is exactly what aviation, and our world, needs now more than ever." Applause erupted warmly, attendees deeply moved by Amelia's honest recounting and the hopeful path forward she illuminated. Amelia stepped from the stage, greeted by colleagues, strangers, and even Patricia, each inspired by the courage she'd shown. In that moment, Amelia Harper knew Flight 825 had landed exactly where it needed to, not just in San Francisco, but in the conscience of an industry and in the hearts of countless people. And now she was certain, the journey toward equality, respect, and understanding had truly begun.